Dr. Henry Archer adjusted his equipment as he stepped onto the soft, spongy terrain of Aquarius. The planet, with its lush foliage and vast bodies of water, was unlike any he'd encountered. Joining him was his fellow researcher and botanist, Dr. Simon Fields, both tasked with gathering unique flora and water samples for their research. "It's incredible, isn't it?" Simon remarked, looking around with wide eyes as he unpacked his botanical kits. Henry nodded, distracted by the reflections of the planet's twin suns dancing on the surface of a nearby lagoon. "Yeah, it's like nothing we've seen before. Let's get the samples quickly. This place. It's unsettlingly quiet." The two men approached the water's edge, carefully collecting samples. As Henry scooped water into a container, a subtle movement caught his eye. He paused, peering into the clear depths. There was a flash of color, something not quite seen but felt, an ethereal presence. "Did you see that?" Henry whispered, his voice tinged with excitement. Simon glanced over, frowning slightly. "See what?" "I didn't catch anything." Before Henry could reply, the water before them stirred, and a figure emerged. It was an Aquarian, her form humanoid but ethereal, skin shimmering with a bioluminescent glow. She looked at them, her eyes wide with what could only be surprise. Simon stepped back, his hand going to the device at his belt. "Henry, be careful," he cautioned. Henry, however, was fascinated. "Hello," he said gently, holding out his hand, showing he meant no harm. The Aquarian tilted her head, eyeing the hand before looking directly at Henry. Her lips parted, and a melodic voice filled the air. "Visitors? Here in our water?" "We're researchers," Henry explained, slowly so as not to startle her. "I'm Henry, and this is Simon. We come in peace." Simon nodded, adding, "We're studying the environment. We didn't mean to intrude." Her gaze softened, and she stepped closer, the water flowing around her like it was part of her very being. "I am Liara," she said. "You are far from your own kind." Henry smiled. "Yes, we traveled a long way to learn about Aquarius." "And what have you learned, Henry, Simon?" Liara asked, a curious lilt to her tone. "That there's life here," Simon answered, "intelligent, beautiful life." Liara laughed, a sound like the tinkling of chimes. "And there is much about you we do not know either. Many of us fear the unknown." "We hope to change that by learning from each other," Henry replied, his gaze earnest. Liara considered this, then gestured to the lagoon. "Then learn you shall. I can teach you about our waters. Will you teach me about your skies?" Henry exchanged a glance with Simon, who shrugged slightly. "We'd like that," Henry responded warmly. The dialogue broke some of the initial tension, and Liara stepped fully out of the lagoon, revealing her full, graceful figure. "Come then, let us exchange knowledge. The water is just the beginning." As the suns began to set, casting a golden glow over the lagoon, the three beings, two from Earth and one from Aquarius, began a tentative but promising exchange, marking the start of an unexpected journey on this water-rich world. The days on Aquarius morphed into a harmonious routine as Dr. Henry Archer and Dr. Simon Fields deepened their understanding of the alien environment, guided by Liara's insights. The researchers had established a makeshift lab near the lagoon, filled with samples and equipment buzzing softly in the background. "So, this plant here reacts to touch?" Simon asked, pointing to a frond that shimmered under the lab's artificial lights. Liara nodded, her skin catching the light with a subtle glow. "Yes, it's a defense mechanism. Much like your Earth's mimosa plant. It also filters the water, keeping our lagoon clear." Fascinated, Henry jotted down notes. "Incredible adaptation. It's amazing how life evolves similarly yet so distinctly on different worlds." Simon looked up from his microscope, his face bright with curiosity. "Liara, could you tell us more about how your people use the flora here? Medicinally, perhaps?" Liara moved closer, her gaze thoughtful. "Many plants here are used to heal. This one," she picked up a violet-hued leaf, "is crushed and applied to wounds. It accelerates regeneration." Henry exchanged an impressed look with Simon. "We have similar practices, but nothing as effective. Could we try synthesizing its active compound? It might have potential back on Earth." Liara's eyes sparkled with interest. "That could be beneficial for us to learn as well. We use the plants directly, but synthesizing could conserve resources." As the trio discussed the possibilities, the lab filled with an air of collaborative excitement. They mapped out experiments, schedules, and cultural exchanges. Henry found himself particularly intrigued by the Aquarians' approach to science. It was intuitive, woven deeply with their spirituality and respect for nature. "Tell me, Liara," Henry began as he adjusted a microscope, How do your people view the stars? Our astronomers back home are quite eager to learn about your constellations. Liara smiled, pointing upwards through the transparent part of the lab roof, where the night sky began to unveil. We see the stars as ancestors, watching over us. Each constellation tells a part of our history. Simon, ever the documentarian, grabbed his camera. Mind if I record this? It could be vital for our anthropological studies. Not at all, Liara agreed, as she began outlining constellations, narrating myths that sounded both alien and oddly familiar, tales of heroes, of lessons learned, and of the eternal dance between the seas and skies. The night deepened, and their conversations flowed from scientific to personal. Henry found himself sharing stories of Earth, of the ocean's vastness, which seemed to mesmerize Liara. It seems water is a universal language, Henry mused, watching Liara's rapt expression. Yes, she agreed. It connects all life. Simon, looking between the two, raised his eyebrows slightly but said nothing. Instead, he turned his attention back to his notes, documenting everything. Their discussions lasted until the twin suns of Aquarius hinted at dawn. Tired but exhilarated, the trio decided to call it a night. As they stepped out of the lab, Liara hesitated, then reached out to touch Henry's arm gently. "Thank you," she said softly, her eyes reflecting the twin sun's first light. "For respecting our world, for sharing yours." Henry smiled, feeling a warm connection that went beyond their scientific pursuits. "It's our pleasure, Liara. There's much we can learn from each other." As they parted ways for the night, Simon clapped Henry on the shoulder. "You know, this is groundbreaking stuff, Henry. We're not just exploring a new world, we're connecting with it on a fundamental level." Henry nodded, watching Liara disappear into the morning mist that began to settle over the lagoon. "Yeah," he agreed, a sense of wonder filling him. "It's just the beginning." As the suns of Aquarius climbed into the sky, casting a brilliant glow over the lagoon, Dr. Henry Archer and Dr. Simon Fields prepared for another day of research. The crisp morning air buzzed with the calls of unseen creatures, a constant reminder of the unexplored mysteries surrounding them. Henry, adjusting his equipment, turned to Simon. "We need to check the sensor placements today. The readings were off yesterday evening." Simon nodded, pulling a map from his bag. "Let's plot a route that takes us past those thermal vents Liara mentioned. There might be a correlation between the vent activity and the sensor anomalies." As they discussed their plans, Liara approached, her steps silent on the soft earth. "Good morning. I see you are busy as always," she greeted, a smile warming her features. "Good morning, Liara," Henry replied, returning the smile. "We're just planning our day. Interested in some field work?" Liara's eyes lit up. "I would love to. There is much about this area even we don't fully understand." Together, the trio made their way to the first sensor location, trekking through dense foliage and over slick moss-covered stones. The conversation turned from scientific to personal as they walked. Simon, ever curious about alien cultures, asked, "Liara, how do your people manage leadership and governance? We've noticed there's no obvious hierarchy among those we've met." Liara glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. "We operate on consensus. Our leaders are advisors, not rulers. Decisions are made as a community, every voice is as important as any other." Henry listened intently, fascinated by the stark contrast to human political systems. "It sounds ideal. No power struggles?" "There are debates, of course," Liara conceded. "But we strive for harmony. Conflict is a disruption to the whole community, not just the individuals involved." As they reached the first sensor, Henry crouched to examine the device, which was half buried in the soft bank of the lagoon. "This one's been submerged. Might explain the strange data." Simon helped him dig it out, wiping mud from the solar panels. "Let's recalibrate it and set it out further from the water's edge." "Liara, could the wildlife here have moved it?" "Possibly," she replied, helping them to reposition the sensor. "Some aquatic animals are curious. They might have nudged it while exploring." With the sensor reposition, they continued to the next site, their route taking them closer to the thermal vents. The air grew warmer and more humid as they approached, the ground beneath their feet thrumming softly with geothermal activity. Liara stopped suddenly, her gaze fixed on a nearby bush. "Do you hear that?" Henry and Simon fell silent, straining their ears. A soft humming came from the direction Liara indicated, growing louder as they drew nearer. "It's coming from under the ground," Simon observed, his tone a mix of excitement and caution. Henry knelt, placing his hand on the soil. "Vibrations," he murmured. "It's like the ground is singing." Liara smiled at his description. "This is why we brought you here. During certain times of the year, the vents harmonize. It's rare to witness. They spent several moments in awe, the hum enveloping them in a natural symphony. The experience bonded them further, a shared marvel at the planet's wonders. After the vents, they returned to recalibrating the remaining sensors, discussing potential collaborative papers they could co-author. As the day wound down, they found themselves back at the lagoon, the setting suns painting the sky in vivid hues. Liara turned to Henry, her expression earnest. "You and Simon have shown great respect for Aquarius. It's made me think. There is much I would like to share about our deeper traditions, our spiritual connections to the water." Henry met her gaze, sensing the significance of her offer. "We'd be honored to learn about them, Liara. Your world is fascinating, and so are you." Simon chuckled softly, clapping Henry on the shoulder. "Looks like you're about to get an even deeper understanding of Aquarius, Henry." As they parted ways for the evening, the air between Henry and Liara crackled with the promise of new discoveries, both scientific and personal. As night fell, the twin moons of Aquarius cast a silvery glow over the landscape, transforming the lagoon into a mirror reflecting a star-filled sky. Dr. Henry Archer and Dr. Simon Fields set up their night vision equipment to observe nocturnal wildlife, while Liara prepared to share something of her world that went beyond flora and fauna. "Tonight is special," Liara began, her voice hushed in reverence. "It's the night of reflection, when the moons align in a way that amplifies their light. It's a time for sharing, understanding, and connecting deeply with the essence of Aquarius." Simon, ever the documentarian, readied his camera, his interest piqued. "Is this a common event? How does it affect you and your people?" Liara smiled, her eyes reflecting the moon's light. "It happens once every 7 cycles. It affects the tides, the wildlife, and even us. It's a night when the barrier between physical and spiritual grows thin." Henry looked at Liara, intrigued. "What do you usually do during this night?" "We gather by the water, share stories of our ancestors, and sing the songs of the moons. Tonight, I wanted to share this with you both," she explained, leading them to the water's edge. They sat close to the lagoon, the water gently lapping at their feet. Liara began to sing in a low, melodic tone that resonated with the humming of the planet itself. The song was complex and beautiful, filled with lilting highs and sonorous lows. Henry was captivated. "It's beautiful, Liara. What are you singing about?" Liara paused, a gentle smile on her face. "It's a song of beginnings, of the creation of the stars, moons, and Aquarius itself. It tells of how everything is interconnected." Simon listened intently, recording the moment. "It's fascinating how music can tell such complex stories. Do you think this connection to nature's cycles helps your people maintain harmony?" "Yes, it reminds us of our place in the universe," Liara replied. "Not above or below, but part of a greater whole. What about you, Henry, Simon? How do your people reflect on their place in the cosmos?" Henry exchanged a look with Simon, who shrugged slightly. "Many of us are still figuring it out. Nights like this make you think more deeply about it, though." The conversation turned to tales of Earth's natural wonders and the human efforts to understand and protect them. Henry shared stories of the northern lights, of meteor showers viewed from mountaintops, and how these experiences had a way of bringing people together. Liara listened, fascinated. "It seems that despite our differences, we find common ground in our awe of the universe." "Yes," Simon agreed, "it's these moments that make you appreciate the beauty of life and the world around you." As the night deepened, they continued to talk, sharing stories and insights. Liara taught them more songs, and in return, Henry and Simon shared poems and classic tales from Earth. When the moons finally reached their zenith, casting the brightest light, Liara stood and extended her hands to both men. "Let's make a pact tonight. To always share, learn, and respect each other's worlds." They each placed a hand in the center, affirming the pact. "Agreed," Henry and Simon said in unison, the significance of the moment not lost on them. The night of reflection ended with a sense of peaceful camaraderie and a deepened understanding of each other's cultures. As they returned to their camp, the echoes of Aquarian songs mingled with human laughter, a symbol of their newfound friendship and respect. In the following days, the bond between Dr. Henry Archer, Dr. Simon Fields, and Liara deepened as they delved into a collaborative study of Aquarius' unique ecosystem. They had devised a series of experiments to understand the symbiotic relationships between the planet's flora and fauna, which often mirrored the cooperative spirit they had cultivated among themselves. "This moss here," Simon noted, crouching beside a bright green patch, "it seems to be acting as a natural reservoir. See how it retains moisture even this far from the lagoon?" Liara, kneeling beside him, nodded. It's essential for the survival of many small creatures during dry periods. It can store up to 8 times its weight in water. Henry, scribbling notes, looked up. That's similar to some Earth species, but none are quite this efficient. We could learn a lot from this for our drought-resistant crop initiatives. As they worked, the trio discussed potential applications of their findings, their conversation flowing easily. Henry was particularly keen on understanding how the Aquarian approach could benefit Earth's environmental challenges. Liara was more than willing to share her knowledge, equally curious about human technologies. "How do you manage ecological balance on Earth?" she asked, her tone mixed with concern and curiosity. Henry sighed, a bit of weight entering his voice. "It's a challenge. We've made mistakes, but there's a growing movement to restore and protect our ecosystems." Simon chimed in, "It's about finding balance, much like you do here, but we're still learning. Sharing knowledge like this is a step in the right direction." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden rustle in the underbrush. A small, squirrel-like creature emerged, its eyes bright and its fur a vibrant shade of blue. It approached Liara, nuzzling her hand. "This is an Nari," Liara introduced, her eyes lighting up with affection as she stroked the creature. Naris are very sensitive to environmental changes. Their well-being is a good indicator of the health of our ecosystem. Henry watched with interest. "It's like the canary in the coal mine for us. Animals often tell us what we can't immediately see about our environments." "Yes," Liara agreed. "They teach us about the health of our world." As the day progressed, they collected samples and data, discussing how each piece of information could help paint a broader picture of ecological stewardship. The suns began to set, casting long shadows over the landscape, and they decided to head back to camp. On the way, Simon looked thoughtful. "You know, this partnership could lead to more than just academic papers. We could influence real change." Henry nodded, feeling a surge of optimism. "I agree. What we're learning here could help both our worlds. Liara, would your people be open to more extensive cooperation with Earth?" Liara's expression was hopeful. "I believe so. The elders are cautious, but they see the value in learning and sharing. Your respect for our ways goes a long way." Back at camp, the trio sat down to document their day's findings. The discussion soon veered into more personal reflections about their experiences on Aquarius. "It's not just the science," Henry found himself saying. "It's this connection, understanding not just another ecosystem, but another way of seeing life." Simon nodded. "It's been eye-opening. Makes you appreciate the diversity of the universe." Liara smiled softly. "And for us, it's a reminder that we're not alone in our struggles to protect our world. Your friendship and collaboration have been gifts." As they wrapped up for the night, the air between them was filled with a sense of camaraderie and mutual respect. They had started as researchers from different worlds, but their shared goals and dreams had turned them into something more, partners in the truest sense of the word. As Dr. Henry Archer and Dr. Simon Field settled into a routine on Aquarius, the cultural exchange with Liara and her people started to reveal the complexities of interstellar diplomacy. The Aquarians, curious about human technology and eager to share their ecological wisdom, invited the researchers to a gathering meant to foster deeper understanding and potential collaboration. "This gathering is important," Liara explained as they walked towards the central meeting area of her community, a beautifully constructed pavilion by the lagoon. "It's a chance for our elders to meet you officially and see the benefits of our cooperation." Henry nodded, adjusting the translator device in his ear. "We appreciate the invitation. It's a privilege to be here and learn from each other." Simon, carrying a digital portfolio of their research, added, "We've prepared a presentation on our findings so far, highlighting how the exchange has been mutually beneficial." As they reached the pavilion, they were greeted by a group of Aquarian elders, their expressions a mix of curiosity and caution. The head elder, a distinguished figure with flowing robes, extended a hand in greeting. "Welcome, Henry, Simon," he began, his voice resonant. "Liara speaks highly of your respect for our ways and your eagerness to learn." Henry took the lead, expressing their gratitude. "Thank you for welcoming us. We hope to share not just knowledge but also a commitment to preserving our worlds." The meeting progressed with presentations and discussions. Henry and Simon showcased their scientific discoveries, emphasizing the potential applications for both Earth and Aquarius. Liara helped bridge the gaps, translating both language and cultural nuances. One of the elders, intrigued, questioned, "Your technology is advanced, but how do you ensure it serves the well-being of all?" "We strive to maintain balance with nature." Simon responded thoughtfully, "It's a challenge, but one we're increasingly committed to. Part of our mission here is to learn alternative ways, such as yours, to achieve balance. The dialogue deepened, with both sides exploring concepts of technology, sustainability, and the ethical implications of interplanetary exchange. The elders were particularly interested in the human approach to global decision-making. How do you resolve conflicts of interest, especially on a planetary scale? One elder asked. Henry admitted, it's complicated. Our history has its share of conflicts, but it's an ongoing process of negotiation and compromise. Learning from your consensus approach could benefit us greatly. As the meeting concluded, the atmosphere was hopeful. The elders expressed their willingness to continue the exchange, proposing a series of joint initiatives to explore both technological and ecological solutions. Walking back from the pavilion, Liara smiled at Henry and Simon. That went well. They see the sincerity in your efforts. Simon, relieved, replied, it's all about finding common ground, isn't it? Despite the differences in technology and culture. Yes, Henry added, looking out over the lagoon bathed in moonlight. And respecting those differences, learning from them instead of trying to change them. As they discussed the day's events, the trio felt a renewed sense of purpose. The path forward was lined with challenges, but the promise of collaboration, of blending the best of both worlds, was a powerful motivator. That's the beauty of this exchange, Henry reflected. It's not just about what we take back with us, but what we leave behind: knowledge, understanding, and hopefully, a lasting friendship. Liara agreed, her gaze reflecting the twin moons. And perhaps, a better future for us all. Their conversation lingered into the night, under the stars of Aquarius, as they contemplated the bridge they were building, one founded on mutual respect and shared goals. As Dr. Henry Archer and Dr. Simon Fields continued their research on Aquarius, the planet's volatile nature presented new challenges. The skies, normally clear and dotted with the twinkling lights of distant stars, began to darken ominously one afternoon. Simon looked up from his equipment, frowning at the changing weather. Looks like we're in for a big one, Henry. The sensors are picking up some serious atmospheric disturbances. Henry, reviewing data on a handheld device, nodded in agreement. We should secure the lab. Last time a storm like this hit, it took weeks to recalibrate everything. As they began to batten down the hatches, Liara approached, her expression tense. This is no ordinary storm. It's a convergence, a rare event when the tidal forces of the moons align with a shift in the planet's magnetic field. It can be destructive. Henry paused, concern etching his features. What do you usually do in these cases? We retreat to the caves by the western ridge. They're shielded from the worst of the electromagnetic fluctuations. You should come with us. Gathering essential equipment, the trio headed towards the caves. The wind picked up, howling around them as the first raindrops began to fall, heavy and cold. Inside the cave, the Aquarians had already set up a makeshift camp. Lanterns cast a soft glow against the walls, and supplies were neatly organized in the corners. Simon, looking around, was impressed. You're well prepared for situations like this. Liara smiled wryly. Necessity is the mother of invention, Simon. We've learned to respect our planet's moods. As the storm raged outside, the group settled in. Henry and Simon took the opportunity to discuss their findings with some of the Aquarian scientists present, exchanging ideas and theories. One elder, a geologist, shared insights into the planet's magnetic field fluctuations. These storms can affect our technology, our navigation systems, even our biology. But they also recharge our aquifers and bring nutrients up from the deep. There's a balance. Henry, always eager to learn, absorbed the information. There's a rhythm to it, then. An intense, chaotic rhythm, but a rhythm nonetheless. Conversation flowed freely, the storm outside a stark contrast to the warmth and camaraderie inside the cave. At one point, Liara approached Henry, her gaze serious. Henry, I want to show you something, she said, leading him deeper into the cave. They stopped before a series of ancient murals illuminated by the soft light of a lantern. The paintings depicted scenes of Aquarians navigating great floods and winds, a testament to their resilience. These murals are old, from a time when our ancestors were still learning how to survive these storms. They remind us that we are not in control, only ever adapting, Liara explained. Henry studied the murals, moved by the artistry and the stories they told. Humans could learn a lot from this. There's a humility here, a recognition of being part of something larger. Liara nodded. Exactly. It's about living with the planet, not against it. They returned to the group, finding Simon deep in discussion with an Aquarian biologist about the adaptive behaviors of native fauna during storms. As the night progressed, the storm's fury seemed to grow, But inside the cave, buffered by rock and solidarity, Henry and Simon felt a profound sense of security and belonging. When the storm finally began to abate, the group ventured outside. The landscape had transformed, wet and glistening under the moon's light. Fresh streams trickled where none had been before, and the air was vibrant with new scents. "It's a renewal," Liara said softly, watching a new dawn break. "Difficult, sometimes frightening, but ultimately, it brings new life." Henry, inspired, replied, "A powerful reminder of nature's cycles. Back home, we often forget that." As they walked back to the camp, the ground squelching under their boots, Simon summed up the experience. "We'll have a lot to report when we get back. But more than the data, we'll have stories of survival and adaptation, lessons on living with the earth, not just on it." The experience of the storm had not only provided them with valuable scientific data but had also deepened their understanding of Aquarius and its people, forging stronger bonds in the face of nature's immense power. As the suns of Aquarius rose on the horizon, casting a golden hue over the revitalized landscape, Dr. Henry Archer, Dr. Simon Fields, and Liara surveyed the aftermath of the storm. The air was fresh, filled with a sense of renewal, but also a poignant reminder that their time on Aquarius was drawing to a close. Standing by the lagoon, now brimming with new life, Simon broke the silence. "It's hard to believe our expedition is almost over. It feels like we just started understanding this place." Henry nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. "I know. There's so much more we could learn from Aquarius and the Aquarians. It's not just the scientific knowledge, but the way of life here. It's changed my perspective." Liara, who had been quietly listening, turned to them. "Your journey here has meant a lot to us as well. You've shown us that there are humans who seek to learn and share, not just take." The three of them walked back to the camp to begin packing up the equipment. As they organized, they discussed the possibilities of continuing their collaboration, despite the vast distance that would soon separate them. Simon, while coiling some cables, looked up. "What if we set up a remote exchange program? We could send data and continue our projects. With the communication arrays we've set up, it's feasible." Henry was quick to agree. "I think that's a great idea. And we should start planning the next expedition. There's groundwork we can lay for a more permanent presence, a research outpost." Liara was thoughtful. "An outpost would be welcome, but it would need to be something agreed upon by all. We value our solitude and balance with nature. Any long-term human presence would need to respect that deeply." "We understand," Henry reassured her. "Anything we plan will be in full cooperation with your people. We've learned too much from each other to risk losing that trust." As the packing continued, Henry pulled out a small, sealed container. "Liara, we want you to have this." He handed her the container, which held soil samples from various Earth environments. Liara accepted it, her eyes widening with curiosity. "What is this?" "It's a gesture of goodwill," Simon explained. "Each type of soil represents a different biome from Earth. Think of it as a botanical archive. Maybe your scientists can learn something from them, just as we've learned from your plant life." Liara smiled, genuinely touched. "Thank you. We will treasure this. And in return, please take this." She presented them with a similar container, this one filled with Aquarian seeds. "Perhaps these can grow on Earth, a symbol of our growing friendship." The exchanges made, the final evening on Aquarius was spent by the lagoon. They shared stories, laughter, and reflections on their experiences. As the night grew deep, Henry found himself looking at Liara, struck by the profound connection they had forged. "Liara, saying goodbye is going to be harder than I thought," Henry admitted, his voice thick with emotion. Liara reached out, taking his hand. "This is not goodbye, Henry. It's just another phase of our journey. We are connected now, regardless of distance." Simon joined in. "She's right. We've started something that won't end just because we're not physically here." Morning came all too quickly, and with it, the time to depart. As they loaded the last of their gear onto the shuttle, Henry turned to Liara. "We'll be back. And we'll bring more people who believe in what we've started here." Liara nodded, her expression serene yet hopeful. "We'll be waiting. And in the meantime, we'll keep the communication lines open. We have much to teach each other." With a final embrace, Henry, Simon, and Liara said their farewells. The shuttle lifted off, leaving Aquarius behind but carrying with it new knowledge, new friendships, and the promise of a shared future that transcended the stars themselves.